Hey Triple students, so we're going to look at plant defences. Now you have been doing, with your trilogy work, you will have been doing about human defences against pathogens such as bacteria, funguses and viruses. So this one is a triple topic because it's about plants. So you need to be able to describe the different physical and chemical defences that plants use to act against the infection of pathogens. Now, to make it a triple topic and to make it the higher level, you might be asked to compare against human responses, or be relating this information to a completely different plant that you've never heard of and making suggestions. Let's get cracking. Okay, so today we are going to be looking at, now this is related to a different lesson, so don't worry too much about it, but this is what we're going to be looking at. We're going to be looking at plant defences. Plants don't have immune systems, but can compare to animals. They've developed a wide range of physical and chemical defences which detect invading organisms and prevent them from causing extensive damage. So 32 versus 22. Don't worry about the other things on the table. Yes, so plants can defend them in a higher variety of ways than humans can, essentially. So they can be physical barriers that prevent microorganisms entering the plant. So in a human, skin would be considered a physical barrier, but they can also be chemicals, so substances that are secreted by the plant to kill microorganisms. So sweat and tears is a good example for ours. Hydrochloric acid is a good chemical defense. So similar. We're going to look at physical defenses first. When we do links between topics, so the next one you would have looked at when doing photosynthesis. So you might not quite have got there yet with the trilogy work. So we're just going to sort of breeze through it, and hopefully when you get there, you'll find it easier. So this is the structure of a leaf. Now you might want to pause it if you've already done this and start labelling the leaf if you can. If not, the labels are going to be on the next slide, and I will attach a document that has this on, or you can draw it. You can draw a simple version of it. It's not a complicated drawing. So let's go through the labels. So the top layer, I always like to imagine this is a body, and people put wax in their hair. So I always remember waxy cuticle goes on the top on the hair. And then the top layer is the upper epidermis. Now the upper epidermis means skin, like on humans, our skin is called our epidermis. So this is the top layer of skin. So I normally do this quite physically. So the wax cuticle is the hair, and then I would stroke my skin on my face. The next layer is the palisade layer, and the really key adaptation of this layer is the amount of chloroplasts. You can see them all there, they're all green. And so normally for this I would do spotty skin to remind me, making it quite visible because there's lots of chloroplasts. The next layer I would normally squidge my middle because this is the spongy layer, or the spongy mesophyll layer. And this is squidgy and spongy because it has air gaps. And that is so that gases for respiration and photosynthesis can circulate appropriately. The bottom layer, so this is normally where you tap yourself on the bum, is the lower epidermis. And then we have got two different types of cell at the bottom and a gap. Now the two either side would be the guard cells, and then we have got the stomata. Now, if you've got a particularly wicked sense of humour like I have, imagine the guard cells are your butt cheeks, and I won't going to go into any further detail, but it's quite a funny way of remembering it. If you can physically attach names to parts of your body, is quite a good way of learning things. And stomata is a pore that opens and closes to allow gases and water in and out. The epidermal cells of a plant are covered in a waxy cuticle, and this is the first physical defense for plants. The outer cells of an organism are epidermal. This is the person who wrote this PowerPoint, by the way. So the outer cells of an organism are called epidermal cells, and that's like the skin. So that defense is very similar to human. So quick thing to think about, you've got 2 minutes to discuss, obviously not with 2 people, but which property of wax makes their substance a good physical defense? It might help you to consider the example of rugby players who put wax on their eyebrows on hot days to stop the sweat running into their eyes. Have a think. So let's look at the waxy cuticle. You can see the wax layer peeling off there a little bit. The epidermal cells on a plant are covered in a waxy cuticle. It's waterproof and it reduces water loss from the plant. It also prevents pathogens from coming into direct contact with the epidermal cells. So because it's waterproof as well, you get a lot less pathogens coming in and reduces the risk of infection. See if you can answer these questions based on what you've just written. Type of plant you would expect to have a thick waxy cuticle, and explain your answer. Think of a plant that has thick leaves. Evergreen trees or deciduous trees such as ivy, holly, they have really thick cuticles and that reduces water loss. Suggest a location on a plant where the epidermal cells will not have a waxy cuticle and explain your answer. I think probably the roots because there's no leaves there. The waxed cuticle of a plant like a cactus which lives in arid conditions will be particularly thick to reduce water loss. So if we're comparing, we would think of similarities and differences. So they both have waxy cuticles, but we wouldn't be wanting plants in a desert, would we, to lose water. They need to maintain water, and the concentration gradient outside the plant will be particularly large compared to inside the plant, so very thick, whereas aquatic plants live in a water, they constantly have water going in and out. They don't lose water as readily. They always have it available, and so will have little or no waxy cuticle. And yeah, roots won't be covered in a waxy cuticle because the main functions of these cells are to absorb water from the soil, and therefore they will have a waxy cuticle, and this function would not be possible because they need to get water through that layer. So here we've got a palisade cell coming from a plant cell, or from a leaf. Thinking about the structure of simple eukaryotic plant cells like the palisade mesophyll cell shown, which barrier is likely to fit the definition of a physical barrier? So we were looking at that plants have physical barriers preventing microorganisms from entering them. Remember what's on the outside of a plant cell? So on a plant cell, we have a cell wall, which is made of cellulose, which is the sugar, type of sugar all joined together. And that is going to stop pathogens going into the cell. Things to know about it structurally is it provides support and it stops the cells bursting if they become too turgid. These are the chemical defenses for plants. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the type of plant chemical defenses using a code crack. So you're going to need to pause. Here we go. Pause it. Insecticides is a chemical produced by plants. Okay, so this you might want to draw this table down. So we're going to look at the chemical defense and details and examples. So insecticides. So the word side, C-I-D-E-S, means death. So insecticides means kills insects. Homicide means killing humans. Suicide, su is Latin for I or me. So that would be that. Matricide would be killing your mother, which isn't nice. Herbicide killed herbs or plants. So the word side means, killing. Genocide, for example, means killing a genus, so a group of people. So that's just a bit of Latin sort of word. I think it's Latin word structure. So if you see the word side at the end like that, then that means death. Okay, so let's look at insecticides. So insecticides are chemicals that are naturally produced by plants to kill insects as well as insect larvae. So pyranthrons are produced by chrysanthemums. So they're like a filler plant in bouquets. Some plants produce nicotine and neem, which is used as an oil actually to protect things as well. But some plants produce insecticides. They produce chemicals that kill insects, which is very handy adaptation. Let's look at the next one. You might want to pause this. So this is another type of chemical defense. Insect repellent. So put that in your table, insect repellents, because plants produce that. This is a countdown. So this is a organism that transmits a disease or parasite from one animal to another. You should have come across this before, particularly when talking about malaria or the plague. But in physics, it has quantity and direction. It's a vector. So insect repellents repel the insect vectors that carry disease, such as the female mosquito that carries malaria. I just said it. So some plants just repel insects, which might carry disease. So that's good. So citronella oils and extracts come from lemongrass and repel mosquitoes. So we know that if you use a citronella candle, it wards off a lot of flying insects. That's because it's a repellent. Handy. Next one, so give it a pause. So this is a chemical defense found in plants. Cyanide. Now, I think you've probably all heard of it. Cyanide is a poison. And here's another one. Antibacterial chemicals. Let's put this in the table. So we've got cyanide and antibacterial compounds. So based on other communicable diseases, another chemical defense that you can find in plants. Not antibacterial, not antiviral. So some plants produce cyanide, some plants produce antibacterial compounds, and some plants produce antifungal compounds. All of these are ways that plants defend themselves. So let's have a look at how we would name them. So we can actually, some antifungal compounds, they actually are just enzymes. So they break down certain fungi. So for example, if we've got cellulase, that breaks down cellulose. And if you've got the fungus chitin or chitin, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, to be honest, that we can probably guess the enzyme that's going to break that down or what will be in that antifungal compound. I should imagine it will be chitinase. There we go. Antifungal compounds also contain caffeine because it's toxic to fungi. So coffee beans. So here are some chemical defenses of the plants. So antifungals kill fungi such as the enzymes, which break down the cell walls of the fungi, or they contain toxic chemicals. It's a pretty half decent table. So what you need to do now is to finish this table off, to find some other find some other plant defenses and whack them in. These are chemical ones. Other physical defenses you might want to look at are things like predatory defenses, so thorns and things like that. So this is a grade 9 question. So there's a type of fungal pathogen called Fusarium spp. It produces an enzyme called cutinases. State the action of these enzymes and therefore ultimately what this will do to this particular fungi and what it does to enable it to do it. So you might want to pause it now and have a little think, or go and Google it. Answers on the next slide. So cutinases break down the waxy cuticle. So you probably could have worked that out. Allows the pathogen to penetrate and come into direct contact with the epidermal cells, increasing the risk of infection. So that's a very clever fungus.